Hello and welcome to the In the Tank podcast, episode 206, the podcast that explores the work of think tanks across the country. As always, I am your host, Donald Kendal, and joining me today, again, we got a full crew here. Across from me, we have Jim Lakely, Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you, Donnie.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Joining us via the internet, I got somebody chastised me for saying interwebs. They didn't think it was a joke or funny enough, but we've got Isaac Orr, Policy Fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. How are you today, good sir?
I did not have a sexual relationship with that woman.
Very timely impersonation there. Good. You're really.
He's been working on that since the 90s.
He just got it down. Just got it down.
Exactly. When I started it, when I got my first Beanie Baby.
Nice. Also joining us, we have Justin Haskins, editorial director here at the Heartland Institute. How are you, sir?
I could be doing better if a certain podcast host would get my title correct.
That's like 6 times in a row. Right. Come on, man.
Yeah, but come on.
All right, so we're going to be talking about a number of things. We've got a study out of Cornell that we'll be talking about. Isaac brought to my attention a pretty interesting article about green energy, which kind of ties into the topic that we were discussing last week. And then we have a Sweet Tax Foundation thing that's kind of breaking down the real value of $100 in an area near you. And I am also planning on talking with a one Lindsay Stroud about vaping and e-cigarette policy, which will be happening at the end of the episode. So we should probably get into it, but I can't get into anything before giving you all an update on our Democratic candidate survivor pool. Jim, we should really consider having like a soundbite that introduces the segment.
There needs to be music or something.
A drop, as they say in the biz.
So,
bump, another one bites the dust.
There you go. We'll just have Isaac sing it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not.
The voice of an angel.
Christian Gillibrand.
Kirsten Gillibrand.
Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yeah, you don't need to know her name anymore.
Senator from New York.
Right.
Dropped out just a couple of days ago.
August 28th.
Which that is the second candidate for Mr. Andy's set here. So that drops him down to last place. So he got an additional 20 points from Gillibrand dropping out, which brings him up to 41 points. And in this thing, it's golf score. So the lower point value, the better. So he is in last place, which means Isaac has bumped up to first place. Congratulations, Isaac, for now. I am in second, Jim in third, and Justin in fourth. And like I said, Andy in last place. So Gillibrand dropping out. She attributed that to the fact that she is not going to be a contender in the third debate, she said was fatal to her campaign. So probably nothing really much to reminisce about her as a candidate. But are there any bright spots that you remember? Anything fond that you want to reminisce about before we leave her in the dustbin of this whole campaign season?
Well, Gillibrand probably understands more clearly now than ever that she's a very unlikable person in public. I mean, she got no traction with anybody, and that's just, if it takes this long to weed out 25 people till you finally get to others, maybe one a week here as we move on will be a nice pace.
Sure.
I know nothing about this person. Like, I know that she's a senator, but that is it.
I want you to imagine the most annoying woman you've ever met in your life, and then double it. That's
so her. She's on par with you then.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Or is it I'm a woman joke? Are you like messing with my gender identity right now? Is that really what's happening?
Obnoxious.
I see.
All right, moving on. So good job, Gillibrand. Have fun doing whatever you're doing. She has dropped out. Now we're just looking on to the next one. Wayne Messam, stay in there, buddy. I need you to stay in. If you drop out, that would also drop me down to, I think, last place, probably tied in last place. So stay in there. In fact, I've got a sweet slogan for your campaign, sir. So if you're listening, I'm sure you are. Mess 'em up, with an arrow pointing up as an exclamation mark. Boom. Am I right? That just got him 2 points. Probably going to qualify for the debate now as soon as he starts printing out those slogans. But
I really think that if Wayne Messam is truly listening right now, I want him to know that he should drop out because he's a loser. But if he does agree to drop out, I will give him the remaining balance of my Starbucks gift card in my wallet right now. Some $8.50. This is the best deal you're going to get, Wayne. Take it. Get out. Get out now.
Oh man, we need to tweet that at him.
Yeah, tweet that at him.
I'm going to.
Yeah, me too. I will retweet that.
Actually, is that legal? That might be illegal.
Yeah, don't do that.
Is that tampering?
It's campaign tampering.
All I know is that sounds like a great deal.
Yeah,
it is a great deal. That's the best deal he's ever going to get.
$2.35. All right, come on, guys. We gotta get it on target here. So Jimothy, you just came back from Salt Lake City, a pretty important thing, kind of rebutting what the UN, is that what was going on here?
Yeah, Heartland Institute on Monday, we were in Salt Lake City. And so we were in Salt Lake City because the United Nations was hosting their Civil Society Sustainability Conference in Salt Lake City all week, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to go there Monday. That's when they kicked it off. And we had a 5-hour presentation from climate scientists and policy experts and energy experts rebutting the idea that the United Nations has all the answers and that we need to go to quote unquote sustainable living and all of that kind of nonsense. It's actually really it was fun. A lot of fun. We live streamed that from 11 a.m. Eastern to 3 p.m.
5 hours, huh?
Yeah, almost 5 hours. We ended up going long because, why not? It's free.
Sure.
So we went long. But you could see if you go to heartland.org, there's a feature on the front page there where you can click and see the raw feed of us for almost 5 hours. But if you wait another day or two, or maybe by the time you're listening to this podcast, we'll have a new playlist up that's called Salt Lake City Conference that you can watch all the presentations.
Sweet.
I thought some of the presentations were really good. And actually, one thing to say is you're in Salt Lake City. I've never been to Utah before. I've passed through, but never really stayed for any length of time. So I'm in the hotel bar actually, and then there was this guy from New York who was there. It was kind of obnoxious, and you look around, you realize why the hell would somebody from New York be in Salt Lake City today, right? And it's obviously there were a lot of people there that were staying in our hotel, the Sheraton, to be at the conference. And one night I went down for a nightcap after work, working all day on Monday actually, and there were two guys at the bar who were obviously there for the climate conference. They were talking to each other about climate, and they were both climate activists. And they actually expressed a bit of wariness and kind of frustration and tiredness. Like they're kind of tired of the whole thing. We're not they expressed that we're not getting anywhere. We're not accomplishing anything. It's really getting tiring to do all these things and feel like nothing is happening. And so I just didn't make eye contact. I just smiled, finished my drink, and went upstairs thinking, mission accomplished.
Right. Are you guys harassed by Greta Thunberg? Did she get there with her in her, what was it, submarine, or what was she doing?
A sailboat.
Yes, it was a yellow submarine.
Yeah,
nice.
That's right.
Yeah, somebody was like telling me or asking like, "Oh, are you afraid of a little girl?" type of thing. And I was thinking like, my gut reaction, like, no, just kind of afraid of if her movement gets brought up and we start pursuing these like terrible policies and these like fruitless ideas and stuff like that. And then I was like, but what are you suggesting, that like physically I'm afraid of her? And then I was like looking at like, some video that Jim was showing me, and I'm just like, you know what? I think I am physically afraid of her. I think she could take me in a fight. So my answer to am I afraid of that little girl? The answer is yes. So just an FYI. Still touching on the energy topic, Isaac, you sent an article from Bloomberg titled "Sometimes a Greener Grid Means a 40,000% spike in power prices." So I want to get your take on this. I think this will kind of serve as a nice little end cap of our discussion that we had last week about how terrible wind and solar is. But I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs here. It says, the road to a world powered by renewable energy is littered with unintended consequences, like a 40,000% surge in electricity prices. Texas power prices jumped from less than $15 to as much as $9,000 a megawatt hour this month as coal plant retirements and weak wind left the region on the brink of blackouts during a heat wave. It's a phenomenon playing out worldwide. Germany averted 3 blackouts of its own in June and has seen prices both spike and plunge below zero within days as it swaps out coal and nuclear energy for wind and solar. UK, similar, blah, 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 blah. So Isaac, I kind of want your opinion on all of this, but it says this phenomenon is playing out worldwide. That word connotates a mysterious cause. Is this mysterious to you?
Well, it's as mysterious as Bernie punching the speed bag and getting hit in the face with it. Like the mysterious relationship between cause and effect that plays out in the real world. And so the reason this is happening is because we've been subsidizing unreliable forms of energy like wind, like solar. And in Texas is unique in that they don't pay backup generators to stay online. It's just you sell the energy, you get paid, right? So whenever it's interesting because whenever conservatives are talking about why wind and solar drive up prices, they look everywhere but Texas.
Sure.
But when liberals try to show that it's not increasing the cost of electricity, they look at Texas, and it's like bizarro world, right? But the way that it works is in Texas, the wind is able to bid into their market at a price that is substantially lower than that of coal or natural gas because they get this $24 per megawatt hour subsidy.
Oh, wow.
Also, Texas spent something like $9 billion on transmission lines, and the wind developers did not have to pay for all of that, even though it is only built to serve the wind turbines in like northern Texas. So they socialized the cost of transmission, and they basically forced coal plants to take the losses. So I know that wasn't super clear, so I'll elaborate. In Minnesota, for example, if you want to maintain a reliable grid and have wind and solar, we pay extra to keep natural gas plants just kind of sitting around idle to come online and create that power. They don't do that in Texas. So if you have a coal plant that's just kind of churning out power, steady Eddie, and then the wind picks up, the price could go negative, but the coal plant can't shut down fast enough. So the coal plant actually has to pay people to take their power.
So what does that mean for the consumer, though? Does that mean that, like, theoretically they can get a bill that's negative dollars? They get a check instead of a bill?
That's not how it plays out because the price comes back up after a while. But all that does is, so in Minnesota or California, it is the consumer who is paying extra for that reliability. They are paying the cost. But in Texas, they're effectively forcing other generators, so coal plants and nuclear plants, to absorb the cost of having wind and solar on the grid.
Right.
So that's why you see Texas retiring, 4,000 megawatts or 25% of the total generation fleet of coal. And, the environmentalists or the renewable energy people are saying, oh, look, Texas or coal can't compete in Texas. And it's like, no, you totally rigged the game against coal, and then you're cheering because the wind is coming online.
Sure.
But Texas almost had a blackout. Texas almost had a widespread blackout while I was there for Heartland's Emerging Issues Forum.
During a heat wave, yeah?
Yeah, during it was August 13th, I believe. And like power prices spiked to $9,000 per megawatt hour when they're normally 15. And what happened was it was really hot. People were using their AC, and the wind wasn't blowing.
Wouldn't it have just been perfect if you were doing your presentation on like how terrible these mandates are, and then as you were making your final point, all of the power went out in the region?
Oh man, my Twitter feed would have been vicious.
That would have been great. All right, sweet. Let's move on to our next topic of discussion. I think this will be probably the title of our episode here, which is that according to Cornell University, the Heartland Institute is a part of the intellectual dark web. So how about that, folks? So what I have in front of me is a couple of pieces from the actual study from Cornell, as well as a kind of commentary on it by the Media Research Center. And so it starts off saying a study from Cornell University claims that YouTube channels that feature prominent conservative figures are infecting users with alt-right beliefs. Auditing radicalization pathways on YouTube, written by 5 academics, concluded that channels in the intellectual dark web and the alt-light would be gateways to fringe far-right ideology. The study released on August 22nd linked the Daily Wire founder Ben Shapiro, Dr. Jordan Peterson, comedian and host Joe Rogan, and host Dave Rubin to fringe racist figures like Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor. The study concluded that YouTube's recommender system enables alt-right channels to be discovered even in a scenario without personalization. The study took 360 YouTube channels and split them into 4 categories: control, alt-right, alt-light, and the intellectual dark web. The study analyzed a whole number of videos overall, looked at 79 million comments, and it found that more than 60,000 users altogether, or 12% of those analyzed, had been infected from watching alt-light and intellectual dark web, and were now watching alt-right content. So, should we talk about the study first, or should we talk about the fact that we are labeled as intellectual dark web first? What do you think?
I think we should do this. Let's do the study first.
Study first? No,
Yeah.
forget that. We're doing the other way, because
Why
I
would
don't
you
even
ask
I don't
us?
even
Yeah.
think
Why
people
would you
know.
ask?
I don't even think
Wow.
people know what the intellectual dark web is.
I vote for the study first.
This is not a democracy, all right? This is a dictatorship. I control the panel here. So, intellectual dark web, this is according to Wikipedia, is a term refers to a group of public personalities who oppose what they see as the dominance of progressive identity politics and political correctness in the media and academia. The term idiomatically compares opposition to mainstream opinion to what is illicitly found on the dark web. Ideologically diverse, but nonetheless united against primary adversaries, hailing predominantly from the left, including postmodernism, post-structuralism, Marxism, and political correctness. So that's intellectual dark web. Generally, I would always kind of have it seen referred to as like the Jordan Petersons and the Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, stuff like that. But according to Cornell, the Heartland Institute is part of the intellectual dark web. So if you guys didn't know, our listeners, if you didn't know what the intellectual dark web, you've already been a listener to it. So how about that? But all right,
Yeah.
take it away,
no,
Justin.
There's a part of the study where it describes what intellectual dark web is, according to some New York Times opinion article.
Okay.
And in it, it says, the direct quote from the New York Times article that they're using to help define this term is, quote, a collection of iconoclastic thinkers, academic renegades, and media personalities who are having a rolling conversation about all sorts of subjects, touching on controversial issues such as abortion, which Heartland doesn't do, biological differences between men and women, which shouldn't be controversial, but also Heartland doesn't do that, identity politics, which I don't even see how that's remotely controversial, religion, again, how is that even remotely controversial, immigration, I can understand that one, etc. So that, I guess we somehow fit into that. And I would say academic renegades sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I think that's how we fit in.
That's what
We're
your
renegades.
Twitter description should be.
I'm so excited to start calling myself an academic renegade. So excited.
Right, but I'm looking, and we could touch on the study. I think that's totally secondary in this whole discussion, though. But I mean, just looking at the intellectual dark web, like I said, all those names I mentioned, Tim Pool is also in here. A lot of people that I actually listen to. In fact, my biggest takeaway from this study is like they've supplied me with a sweet list that I haven't heard of some of these people. Maybe I'll check them out. But then moving to the left here, so the alt-light with an L. There are a few people in here that I do listen to, including Stefan Molyneux, Steven Crowder, Blaze TV is on here, Gavin McGinnis is in the alt-light, Tipping Point with Liz Wheeler, which I know that Justin is on time to time. That is in the alt-light category.
Unbelievable.
It's actually, what's really interesting about that is there's no consistency between these different categories at all. So for instance, he just mentioned, Donnie just mentioned that Steven Crowder and The Blaze are both listed as alt-light in the alt-light camp, but Glenn Beck, who is speaking at our 35th anniversary benefit dinner in a month, by the way.
October 4th, get your tickets at Heartland.org.
October 4th, that's right. Tickets at Heartland.org, is listed as part of the intellectual dark web.
Right.
Well, he's the founder of the Blaze and the most famous person on the Blaze. So how can the Blaze be part of the alt-light, but Glenn Beck, the most famous person on the Blaze, is part of the intellectual dark web? It doesn't make any sense at all. Also, Bill Crystal, I think, Jim, you might find this funny. Bill Crystal is listed as part of the intellectual dark web. Bill Crystal.
And not only is he no longer an intellectual or dark, but he is on the web. So 1 out of 3.
That's a good point. The Heritage Foundation is also in one of these camps as well. So I mean, it's totally nuts.
I know Donnie's going to name some more people, but I think it's actually important, and it is funny, and it's flattering to be lumped in, to be included with guys like Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson. These are intellectual giants, heavyweights. These are great guys. Ben Shapiro is another one, and Glenn, and your friend Glenn Beck there. Justin, but this is part and parcel of what the left has been doing. We talked about how they're coming after, so-called climate skeptics or climate deniers and that sort of thing, and writing us out of, polite conversation.
Right.
That's what this is. This is funny, but this is Cornell University, an Ivy League university, basically making a list. As you said, Donnie, this is great. Now I can look up all these guys. These are great. I want to watch more of this stuff. But it is a purposeful intent to write out anybody to the left of your average Ivy League professor, or to the right of your average Ivy League professor, out of polite conversation.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting looped in here. What's funny is that the words Alex Jones and InfoWars do not appear anywhere on this thing.
Well,
so now everybody. So what that really means is now everybody's Alex Jones. It's kind of the unspoken thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was kicked off the platform, so I think that's why he's not on here, because it's a list of YouTube channels. But yeah, alt-light. I think Justin, you had mentioned that is defined as they carry a sense of civic nationalism in their thing, whereas the alt-right channels have a white nationalism, supposedly. So I'm looking through the alt-right channels, and I don't recognize one of these. Like, have you heard of any of these, Justin? Like, I won't name them off here or anything like that, but I seriously have not come across one of these.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the list pretty extensively, and I don't remember seeing anything that rang any bells at all, which in and of itself just kind of proves the point that this is all nonsense. Because if in fact that these are the language that they use in the study is that literally is, if you watch the alt-light channels or intellectual dark web, it infects you. That's the word they use. Yeah. Infects you, so that you go and you watch these radical alt-right channels. But I mean, I went through the alt-right channels. I know lots of people who listen to or watch people on the other two categories all the time. I don't know anybody who is going to these alt-right channels. I've never even heard of. In fact, I'm looking at the list now. I can't find a single one.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a single one that I've heard of.
Exactly. So I mean, I know that's kind of anecdotal or whatever, but like, practically speaking, we have a whole bunch of case samples right here where this gateway to the alt-right is not taking effect. I was curious to see if Cornell would be interested in entertaining the kind of the opposite side of the aisle. Can they do a study that shows whether or not watching like Washington Post or CNN videos will lead you down the path to like the Huffington Post or the Young Turks, and then eventually you'll be watching Democratic Socialists of America videos? Like, is there a gateway there too?
Or reading Matt Brunig.
Don't bring that guy up here. He's not welcome on this podcast.
Jacobin.
Listen,
Jacobin. Eventually you get there.
Jacobin, right? Yeah,
Jacobin.
What's interesting? What's really just stupid about the study? Can we talk about how stupid the study is?
Yeah, feel free. Go off. Yeah, absolutely.
So the study, the way the study works is they looked at YouTube channels, and then they looked at commenters on YouTube channels, and then they determined based on the commenters on these hundreds of thousands of videos apparently that they sampled. They looked at these comments, not all of them, but just a percentage of them, like 12% of the comments. And then they determined based on that whether there was any connection between the comments that they picked and associations with other kinds of content, like alt-right content or something. So they're looking, are people watching intellectual dark web videos then later on watching alt-right videos? Is there some kind of connection there? And what's really ridiculous about all of this is they use as a control, as a way to determine whether or not you're more likely to go watch alt-right videos if you watch intellectual dark web videos. As their control, they use things like the New York Times and Huffington Post and Slate and left-wing publications like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that as their control. So they looked at people who are watching those videos and they said, well, those people aren't anywhere near as likely to go watch alt-right videos. So clearly intellectual dark web and things like that is leading people into the alt-right. This is like the dumbest paper ever in the history of papers. This makes absolutely no sense at all. Of course, people who watch Slate are not going to go become alt-right people. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Slate is on the left. Why would anybody watching Slate then become a fan of alt-right videos? It makes absolutely no sense at all. It's completely ridiculous. And yet that's the control chart that they use. They had a handful of conservative organizations in the control chart. And these are the on the right. This is their control. American Enterprise Institute, National Rifle Association, PJ Media, Project Veritas, Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Woohoo.
That's it. That's all they had. They have a million different groups of, I mean, literally there's hundreds and hundreds of sites listed in their channels, listed in their report here in the intellectual dark web category and the alt-light category. If you combine them together, there is well over 100 different channels listed. And then they list like 7 channels in their control. and then the rest of the channels are The Atlantic, CBS News, LA Times, Rolling Stone. I mean, come on. This is Cosmo. They have Cosmo on here. Cosmopolitan. I mean, this is ridiculous. GQ Magazine, Huffington Post. I mean, this is the shoddiest, most garbage study of all time.
Well,
it makes no sense on any level.
You could go into the methodology and talk about like, some of these videos, whether they have like 100,000 views and then they'll have like 1,000 comments, maybe if it's a leading with a question or something like that. But I mean, that just shows you that like 1% of people watching these videos will actually leave a comment. So is that really a good sample size of this type of thing? And then I'm also kind of curious of like whether or not like what is their like goal here with showing this? Is this supposed to be an indictment of the people that are in the intellectual dark web, or is this an indictment on like the YouTube and how they kind of filter their recommendations?
I think that it's both, probably. What they probably want is for all of these alt-light and intellectual dark web people totally off of YouTube, because the logic is, well, they're infecting people.
Right.
So anybody who watches, so in and of themselves, intellectual dark web and alt-light, they're not necessarily dangerous in and of themselves. Okay, we're willing to admit that. That's basically what this is saying. But when you watch those things, you get infected. Mm-hmm. And then you go and you watch even more radical material. It's like a gateway drug. Right? It's a gateway drug. So we got to stop it. Like, this is the same argument people use to get, marijuana, make marijuana illegal. It's like, because people will smoke marijuana, they might go smoke crack. We can't allow people to smoke marijuana. Right. So this is the same sort of thing. We're basically like the marijuana of the alt-right, apparently.
It's reefer madness.
It's Heartland Institute is reefer madness. That's what this is essentially saying.
You're right.
And so you can't let your kids watch Heartland Institute videos. They're academic renegades who are going to lead your kid onto the path to the alt-right. They're going to become members of the KKK if you don't shut them down right now. Right. That's what this is supposed to be doing.
Can you imagine how the kid would feel if their parents actually made them watch Heartland Institute videos?
What are you trying to say there?
I can't.
I'm just saying, like, as a child, there was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to watch.
Sure.
That probably some children are more intellectual than others, Isaac.
I appreciate that. But let's just remember again, this is about setting the intellectual underpinnings for deplatforming people on the right. That's
right.
what this is. This is 100. It's hilarious. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. And I'm telling you, in a year, 6 months to a year, 18 months, this is going to be this is going to be pointed to justifying deplatforming people like this on YouTube,
or putting some type of labels warning people about content.
Heartland already has warning, quote unquote, warning labels on all of our videos on global warming.
That's true.
They put up a Wikipedia, which is hilarious because Wikipedia is a joke and a lying website, but they have a Wikipedia post for global warming. So before you watch this video, definitely click on this Wikipedia to get context on how the left, the truth for Wikipedia. I mean, it's these little incremental things, but all of this stuff is just it's all about deplatforming the right. The Silicon Valley does not want people that are non-leftists being able to communicate freely on what they consider their creation, their networks. They will do everything they can to stop it, and this is part of it. And it makes me sick, really, as funny as it is.
And then it's all in the title: auditing radicalization pathways on YouTube.
Right.
That's what this is. It's a radicalization pathway. If you watch Glenn Beck or Heartland Institute, you are on a pathway to radicalization.
And it's all one-sided. It's only on the right, apparently.
That's
like
right.
I said,
they don't even bother analyzing the left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, just one quick correction. We've been saying it's a Cornell study. I don't think it's actually Cornell publishing the study. I think they funded it, just to make that clear.
Yeah, whatever. Semantics. All right, let's move on to this next topic here. We would like to talk about this tax foundation piece. This is what is the real value of $100 in metropolitan areas? So this might sound familiar to those that have listened to this show for a long time. That is because it is an elaboration on a thing that they had done on the real value in your state of $100. But this kind of breaks it down by county, which I think is very interesting. So it says in May, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis released new data covering differences in purchasing power in different metropolitan and non-metropolitan areas in 2017. In layman's terms, the data compares how much $100 can buy in different regions of the country. This post focuses on comparing the purchasing power in different metropolitan areas around the country. There are large differences in price levels by region. In general, the regions where $100 buys the least are concentrated around large cities in Northeast and California. Conversely, $100 stretches the most in rural areas of the Midwest and the Southeast. So, like I was saying before, we had covered a tax foundation piece before. How far does your $100 go depending on what state you're in? And kind of the differences were not super stark, but so like in Mississippi, if you had $100 based on a basket of goods and stuff like that, I don't exactly know what the methodology is, but you'd get $116 worth of value out of that $100. Whereas in New York, on the other side of the spectrum, you'd only get $86 worth of value. But, you know, with states, you've got the urban areas, you've got the rural areas, and they kind of mellow each other out a little bit. This new one shows it based on county. So the extremes, we've got the San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, California, where the real value of your $100 is $76.39. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, in Beckley, West Virginia, the real value of $100 is $132.80. So I've got a number of implications that I think this has some important implications. But for those that have actually read the study, do you have any takeaways?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's always interesting. One thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is that this is about purchasing power, right? So it doesn't necessarily take into account earnings differences, and it doesn't necessarily take into account taxes either. So it might take into account taxes on products, I'm guessing, but it probably wouldn't take into account income taxes and stuff like that. So for instance, if you look at the New Hampshire versus Massachusetts comparison, there are counties right along the New Hampshire-Massachusetts border where you earn your $100 goes a little bit less than if you were on the Massachusetts side.
Yeah.
But you're actually better off in New Hampshire because in New Hampshire, there's no income tax and there's no sales tax.
Sure,
so
sure.
you'd be better off in New Hampshire than you would be Mass. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But with what I just said in mind, that makes states that are high tax states even worse. So like
Exactly.
California, for instance. If you're in a part of California where you're getting $76 for your $100 compared to the average in the country, that's on top of the fact that you're paying above average income taxes and other forms of taxation, property taxes, that kind of thing as well, I'm assuming, is not included in this. So, I mean, it's actually, some places will look better than they should. Other places will look worse than they should.
Yeah.
But the high tax states, I mean, it's a really bad deal to live in some of these high tax states because not only are you not getting a lot of bang for your buck, but you're also getting taxed a lot on top of it.
So I did some back of the envelope math here. And so the first kind of numbers that I did were based on the state range from the thing that they had put out a little while ago. So I compared that to the median income of the different states. So I've got New York and Alabama here, right? So the non-adjusted numbers for the median income for New York is $62,700, whereas in Alabama, it's $46,400. However, if you adjust it based on how far your $100 goes in these states, it really narrows the gap. So where there was a gap of, what is it, 1,600 or 16,000 here, after you adjust it, New York, you're left with $54,000 in real terms of money there, purchasing power, and in Alabama, just slightly less, 53,000, but it's only a difference of $600. So it just kind of shows you, that on its face, you can't compare. You have to factor this in. You have to factor in the purchasing power. I took California, who their median income across the state was $67,000, and I adjusted it for that worst county. And in terms of real spending power, you drop down to $52,000, which is actually less than the Alabama after you adjust those numbers. So that was pretty interesting. One other bit of math that I did was just based on the minimum wage, which is one of my biggest takeaways of this whole thing. This whole thing just throws out the idea of having one across the board high federal minimum wage, because $15 in that Santa Clara County in California goes a lot shorter than that Beckley, West Virginia, or whatever I said. So $15 multiplied by 40 hours, we'll say 2 weeks, right? You get paid every 2 weeks or something. So $1,200, and that's just basic math. In San Jose, that purchasing power of that $1,200 is $916, whereas in Beckley, West Virginia, that $1,200 gets you $1,593 of purchasing power. That is a 75% difference there. So if I had one takeaway from this, is it really just kind of like destroys the idea of having a high national minimum wage that's across all of the states.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think that one of the interesting things going forward is going to be as you get more and more people who work from home and technology becomes a bigger part of this and you have more remote workers and that's becoming increasingly more popular. The Heartland Institute has a bunch of people who work remotely, including myself. How is this going to impact that? Because if you get paid a salary for an office that's based in New York City, but you live in, Beckley County, West Virginia,
right.
You're doing way better off than if you lived in New York City.
Exactly.
So if you can
live
work
like a
remotely,
king, man.
and live someplace else, and live someplace rural and have your dollar goes a lot further. And so I think that's really interesting too. How is that going to change where people live going forward in the future, technology, all of that? How are states going to react to that? If it's a lot easier to leave some of these city centers like Chicago or New York or Silicon Valley to go live out in the middle of nowhere and have a much better life in terms of your finances. I think all of that's going to be a really important part of the economy and state laws as well going forward, policymaking over the next, say, 20 to 30 years.
Well, I mean, Jim, so what's your point of view when you're seeing this map? Because now that I'm thinking about it, not only does this kind of destroy the idea of a high minimum wage on a federal level, but like even if you're talking about kind of thresholds where like welfare programs kick in, that nominal number in terms of real dollars, it varies wildly across the country. I mean, we can even talk about tax brackets or anything like that. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually just shows that in a large, continental, diverse, and very populous nation, one size fits all, one policy for all the nation. Policies are a bad idea across the board.
Right.
I mean, it's not just how far $100 will go in Berkeley, California versus, somewhere in Des Moines, near Des Moines, Iowa or something. In fact, looking at the map, seeing Chicago, $100 equals $96.71. I'm actually pretty thrilled with that number. I thought it would be a lot.
Not terrible.
Not terrible. I thought it'd be a lot worse. But yeah, a national tax, we have a national income tax, and that's great. All right. And that's not great, but it's what we have. Right. Sorry. I spoke. It's not great, but
gosh, Jim's a socialist.
Yeah, right. What the heck?
But obviously, this is known already that if you live in California and you have to pay a federal income tax plus the state income tax in California, plus the cost of living is higher. I don't know why anybody would want to live in California. I fled California, and very much for these very reasons, is that not only are my taxes higher, but my dollars aren't going as far. And so because we have such a large and diverse country, I think you're going to see, just as Justin had alluded to, we are becoming a more digitally connected and more mobile society. More people will be working from home, and I think you're going to start to see people starting to vote with their feet, maybe not leaving the state altogether. I'm looking at Massachusetts there for you. Justin, there's not, you have to go pretty far to escape. Maybe up to Maine, you got to go pretty far, but you can still stay in New England and be a Pats fan, but you can live in a better spot and still work remotely. And I think you're going to see, and you actually are seeing this, people are moving out to the exurbs for a better quality of life and for a cheaper standard of living. I live in a farther suburb from Chicago than I would have ever thought just 5 years ago, and part of it is because the standard of living is better and the cost of living is lower.
Right. Isaac, you want to jump in here? You were a gent that worked remotely at the Heartland Institute that at the time was based out of Chicago, but I think you were operating out of Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Yep.
Good talk. All right. So let's... Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was paying $495 for a 2-bedroom apartment that I split with my roommate. So cost of living's good in rural Wisconsin.
All right.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, actually, Chicago is a really interesting place. Jim mentioned that. On the map here, if you're looking at major metropolitan areas and you want to live somewhere, if you're willing to live somewhere that's a little bit further away from the city, but still generally within driving distance of it, then Chicago's actually one of the best places in the country if you want that. That Minneapolis is like that as well. Looks like Dallas and maybe Houston are in that same kind of camp. But most of the cities on the East Coast and West Coast, I mean, it's just a high cost of living, even an hour or two away. It's still a high cost of living.
Wow.
But in Chicago, if you're a couple hours away from Chicago, you're actually have a pretty good situation financially.
I have to revisit the rich states, poor states from ALEC and see if they take this stuff into account, or if we could like superimpose these numbers over their things and see if we could actually see some more dramatic kind of differences among the states. Because I think a lot of people kind of look at the amount of money that you get in income as just standard across the country, and this shows that it doesn't, because the spending power changes radically depending on where you're living in the country. All right. Well, I do also have an interview with Lindsay Stroud on vaping policy, so I'm going to throw that to myself now. All right, so joining me today, I have Lindsay Stroud, State Government Relations Manager and host of the Voices of Vapor podcast here at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic.
Feel free to get nice and close.
We're, ahead of a 3-day weekend, so
that's a good point. Can't complain about that at all. So you are here because you are our resident expert on everything from tobacco harm reduction to vaping, e-cigarettes, and a lot of other things that kind of fall into that. So, but bringing you on specifically because we just released this Tobacco Harm Reduction 101, a guidebook for policymakers. So just kind of give us a little brief elevator pitch of what you would expect to see if you were to open up this booklet?
Well, firstly, that is response to a lot of meetings with lawmakers this year. And I mean, there's a lot of misinformation going on with electronic cigarettes and vaping devices. So trying to address those in a easy to read way for lawmakers or anybody who's curious about the topic, just on what's going on with them. What are they about? It does, provide what is an e-cigarette, as well as distinguishing between the different systems. You've got mods, the big ones, and then you've got the pods or jewel systems. But just everything that goes with them. What was the history of regulations on them when they first come to market in the U.S. And other things with them. I know that there's a section in there about military. I was able this year to do some research, and I found that military members actually smoke less than civilians, which is like the first time ever.
Okay.
They also use electronic cigarettes and vaping devices more so than the general population, which is pretty cool on the efficacy of these being a tool to reduce smoking. But it also addresses the myths, prior to all this hospitalization stories, you did have formaldehyde. That these contain formaldehyde. And the study that did bring it up does, they overheated the device to a level that like no vapor would actually use. When using it, they would change out their coil or whatnot. But also it's still less formaldehyde than what's produced in a combustible cigarette.
Interesting.
Popcorn lung's the same thing as well. So,
well, I mean, so you obviously the comparison is easily drawn to the combustible cigarette, your traditional cigarette, and I think that's kind of where like my main interest comes, and it's kind of like the health implications of this. So, is that kind of why you're so drawn to this? The idea,
they're 95% less harmful for you. The Royal College of Physicians, which is the same body that we use to link the risk of smoking to cancers and just adverse health health issues in the 60s, is the same body that is their direct quote is unlikely to exceed 5% of the harm from combustible cigarettes. Public Health England 2015, first public health body at a national level or a state level, I guess internationally, we declared them 95% less harmful. They reiterated it in late 2018 as well. And actually in those countries where they subsidize healthcare, they do tend to promote the use of electronic cigarettes and vaping devices.
Wow. So, I mean, you have got your ear kind of closer to the ground when it comes to policy regarding these devices and stuff like that. So kind of what is the current state of that? Are we seeing more? Are we seeing a kind of a reduction in the amount of policies and regulations and taxes? Way more.
In 2019, I mean, I think we all got our butts kicked. You saw taxes. At Tobacco 21, you saw just regulations as far as flavor bans, restricting access to those. So you've seen more alarmism, and that really came out after the FDA and the Surgeon General in 2018 decried this youth vaping epidemic. But I will go on the record right here. At the height of youth cigarette use in the 1996, 1997, I forget the exact year, like 30-something% of high school seniors were actually smoking combustible cigarettes. We never tried to ban those. They were also on the verge of suing all these tobacco companies. So if you're going to try to ban them while also getting money from them, I'm assuming it wouldn't really work. But even with it's 20% that they say of high school students who had used an e-cigarette, and I think the 2018 survey, National Youth Tobacco Survey, and the Monitoring the Future survey, and that's still less. But also, people should be aware that the way that they define current use in those studies is anyone who's used an e-cigarette more than once in the past 30 days prior to doing the survey. So it doesn't distinguish whether these people or these kids are, casually vaping at a party or something, or if they're doing
try
it every
this
single
out,
day.
Whatever, sure,
truly addicted, or
and I guess since you brought it up, I mean that seems to be kind of the focus of a lot of the kind of the national stories that I've been seeing, is this idea of the youth vaping epidemic. And I think that I just saw the other day, I think this is kind of new news, but that the FTC is going to be investigating Juul over supposedly marketing towards kids and stuff like that. So, I mean, in your opinion, is this like the biggest deal that we really have to crack down on these things? Because think of the children, Lindsay. What's your viewpoint on this?
Well, unfortunately for Juul, they're kind of like the Kleenex of vaping.
Okay.
You know, I know all these health departments that are reporting adverse effects are like just hoping that they can actually just sit here and blame Juul for hospitalizations, but they can't. I think it's overreaching. I don't think Juul did a marketing campaign to children in general. I think Juul followed the same marketing campaign that any company does.
Sure.
I mean, and their big thing is making the switch. They're targeting smokers.
Right.
And every smoking campaign, they don't show grandpa and grandma, you know, smoking. That's
Right.
always some sexy young person. And actually, Juul, I think, has done better than what you see out of the tobacco companies when they have people, because you actually are seeing older people in their campaign.
Sure.
But market, and also if you look at a Juul package, it's not. It looks like a Marlboro cigarette package. There's no.
It doesn't look like a stick of bubble gum or something.
No, it does not. There's not even images as far as the flavors that they have, and they also only have like what they've got: creme brulee, mango, berry, or fruit medley, and it's terrible. I've tried it. Cucumber, and then other ones on that will be menthol and tobacco.
Sure.
So, and they've actually even talked about being okay with getting rid of the other flavors and just only focusing on mint and menthol and tobacco flavors. Unfortunately, all the studies show for adult smokers, they like flavors as well.
Well, yeah, and you brought that up because I think the last time we talked about this, I brought up the idea of flavors.
Mhm.
And isn't that supposed to be kind of flavors, whatever, does that make it more appealing for kids? And you're like, well, adults like flavors too. And I'm just like, well,
Yes.
oh, yes, obviously. Now that I put those two things together, it's
Hashtag
like,
adults
think
like
about
flavors too.
alcohol. Alcohol
Yep.
is different flavors, right?
Well, think about
Uh,
any restaurant. You don't
Right.
eat prison style food when you go out to eat.
I
It's
know
bland,
it's
so-
it's such a basic idea, but it just like didn't click until you laid it out nice and blunt. But one of the other things I thought about with this kind of push to ban flavors is if they're concerned that youth vaping is going to lead to them to go back to doing cigarettes as some type of gateway to them doing cigarettes, then why would they want to make the only flavors of vaping cigarette flavored? It's like if they were to leave the flavors in there, then they would never go to the cigarettes that taste like garbage. So it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it's just totally counterintuitive.
That's a very good point right there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I think you made this booklet. It's a pretty oversized booklet, but you did that for a specific reason. Why is that?
And to be obnoxious, to let lawmakers know,
Yeah.
for them to read it.
Right.
Honestly, it doesn't have enough bullet points in it.
Sure. Yeah, I heard you mention one time you'd rather it be written in crayon or
Yes.
something.
Yes.
But okay, like if you were to have them have one takeaway, if a policymaker were to pick this up and leaf through it, what would be the one takeaway that you would want them to have?
That electronic cigarettes and vaping devices have emerged as probably the most powerful tool in helping smokers quit.
Right.
And they're not subsidized, and the people selling them cannot sit here and do any reduced health claims on it. And so it's very unfortunate that the media and lawmakers and just people in general who, think this is big tobacco, just fighting this. I mean, I've met, when I write, what I love about writing op-eds here is that I always get emails. Every time I have an op-ed, I'll get an email from some 60-plus-year-old that
Mhm.
is still kind of amazed with all the, alarmism going on with these products, and that's why I keep doing what I do to make sure that these people have access to these products because they've actually transformed their lives.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So we were planning on having you on this episode. I think that we want to do like a deep dive into just
Yeah.
like all of this policy.
Yes.
So I think we're going to do like a really extended thing covering everything.
Yeah, you're
but
gonna put me on camera too, correct?
that's true. Yeah. So the people that just hear your voice, they'll be able to see you live in action. But so we plan to have you on this episode prior to some of these news stories that that I had seen coming out at the beginning of the week. So maybe you can address this one here. There was a couple of stories that were kind of going out talking about these deaths that were supposedly resulting from people vaping.
Yeah,
So
the vaping hospital. You have one death and vaping hospitalizations. I think
Okay.
it's like over 160 in 22 states now. overwhelmingly states that do not have recreational marijuana, and it actually originated out of Wisconsin where they don't have recreational or medical marijuana. And what you're finding is a lot of them are actually being pointed to black market THC vaping products. And you could actually go on Amazon or eBay and you can buy empty packaging of quote unquote name brand. You can also go online and buy empty cartridges, and you can buy a syringe and make your own thing. You get a YouTube video that will show you how to make it.
So what you're saying is that these hospitalizations are more the results of these kind of back alley
Black
reproductions of not legitimate products.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And if you look at these cartridges too, if you look at the packaging, there's no ingredient listings, there's no warnings that would be on a legitimate package of any electronic cigarette product. I mean, right now, and everyone that contains nicotine that's actually regulated has to have that big warning. This contains nicotine, blah blah blah. But you also have to have an ingredient listing, and there's no ingredient listing on any of these. So
a person that has made the switch and are now doing this tobacco harm reduction type of thing, or doing it for that purpose, if they're seeing these stories about these hospitalizations or
don't
something,
buy stuff off the street.
Okay, and that should be the final word about this.
Well, and also every like Juul and all Naked as a popular and e-liquid company, so that's used with the open systems. They've all been regulated by the FDA like since 2016. Actually, you cannot have a product that didn't come out before August 8, 2016. And it had to be registered with the FDA by the end of that year. So, and you will hear stories about how there are products out there that are not regulated, but anything that's on any like store shelf should be that. So you can pretty much trust those places.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Lindsay Stroud, State Government Relations Manager and host of the Voices of Vapors podcast. Thank you for being on with me.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, fantastic. All right, gentlemen, you're still with me here. I think that'll pretty much do it for the episode, though. So, any jokes, anecdotes, any words of wisdom you want to get off your chest, anything like that before we sign off for the week?
I'll just say that a reminder. Glenn Beck is going to be a fantastic 35th anniversary benefit dinner for the Heartland Institute at the Cotillion in Palatine, Illinois on October 4th. That's a Friday from 5:30 to 9 p.m. Go to heartland.org and click on Glenn Beck's face to get your tickets today.
Sweet. Gentlemen, over the internet, what you got? Anything you want to pitch? Isaac?
I have sweet goodbyes. I'll see everyone. Well, I'll talk to everyone in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, you're going to be gone. I remember that. We're going to have quite a hole that we're going to have to try to fill here.
Yeah. I'm going to be in San Francisco documenting all of the incidences of human excrement and needles.
Sweet. Take some pictures.
I will. I've been told that I can't post them on our website, americanexperiment.org, though.
All right.
That's too bad.
Justin, any last words before we sign off here?
No, I think we should end on human excrement pictures.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Justin's face should be the picture for this episode.
Thank you all for joining us this week. Tune in every Friday for a new episode of In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. You could also find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, pretty much everything nowadays. YouTube, if that's where you want to get your content. If you would like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. If you have any comments, suggestions, questions, anecdotes, jokes, feel free to email us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter and at Heartland Inst for the Heartland Institute.
Isaac, where can the fine people find you?
At the Fracking Guy.
On Twitter. Sweet. And Justin, where can the fine people find you?
Facebook and Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. Look for the big, beautiful blue check mark.
Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel and consider donating to the Heartland Institute to support more vibrant free markets, greater individual liberties, and more videos like this one.